Las Vegas, December 12, 1977. The crowd was still screaming for one more song when Elvis leaned down, pulled his daughter into his arms, and whispered something only she could hear. Seconds later, her smile vanished. Decades would pass before Lisa Marie revealed what her father said that night, and why it still breaks her every time she remembers it. The lights at the Las Vegas Hilton showroom shimmered like gold dust. Nearly 20,000 fans packed the room, faces glowing in the glare of flashbulbs. The king was back for his final residency, though no one dared call it that. Backstage, Lisa Marie Presley, barely 9 years old, stood beside a stack of guitar cases. She clutched a small teddy bear with a red ribbon, a gift from her dad that morning. Lucky charm, he'd said with that grin that made everyone believe he'd live forever. But tonight he didn't look immortal. He looked human. Sweat glistened on his temples even before he stepped into the spotlight. Charlie Hodge handed him a scarf. He wiped his brow, nodded, and whispered, "Let's make it count." Then the curtains opened. The crowd exploded. Every voice in the room merged into one deafening wave. Elvis smiled weakly, raised the mic, and said, "Evenin' everybody." His voice cracked, but it wasn't from fatigue. It was emotion. The band kicked into CC Rider. His hips barely moved now, but the sound, it still had that magic. The air trembled with nostalgia, love, and the quiet fear that this might be the end of something none of them were ready to lose. Lisa peeked through the curtain gap, eyes wide. She mouthed the lyrics, swaying with the rhythm. Each note felt heavier than the last. At one point, Elvis turned toward her side of the stage. Their eyes met. He winked, a small, secret signal only they shared. The next song rolled, then another. Love Me Tender, Hurt, Always on My Mind. Each one slower than usual, softer. He wasn't performing tonight, he was confessing. By the 90-minute mark, he should have ended. Security was already whispering about his heart rate, the heat, the lights. But he refused to stop. He waved off the band, grabbed the mic and said, "One more for the little lady watchin' backstage." The crowd roared. He never told them who the little lady was. But Lisa knew. The opening chords of Can't Help Falling in Love filled the air. She froze, clutching the teddy bear tighter. Elvis's voice trembled. The spotlight framed him in silver, catching the tears he didn't bother to hide. He reached the final verse, the one he'd sung thousands of times, but this time he slowed it down. "Take my hand. Take my whole life too." Each word lingered, as if he were saying them not to the crowd, but to someone smaller, closer. The crowd stood, cheering before the last note even finished. Scarves flew, hands reached, lights flashed. But backstage, Lisa couldn't move. She pressed her hand to her chest, whispering, "Why does it sound like goodbye?" When he turned and waved toward her, she saw something new in his eyes. Not exhaustion, not pride. Peace. The house lights dimmed. The band began to pack up. Lisa ran to the side door, waiting for her dad to step down from the stage. He stopped halfway on the stairs, looking around the emptying room like he wanted to remember every sound, every face, every light. Then he smiled, soft, tired, and knowing. No one realized it yet, but the king had just taken his final bow. Backstage smelled of hairspray and sweat, the air thick with adrenaline. Elvis had finished what should have been his last number, but the crowd refused to let go. "Encore! Encore!" they screamed, stamping their feet until the floor shook. He looked at his band. Charlie Hodge whispered, "You sure, boss? You're done for tonight." Elvis smiled faintly. "Not till she hears her song." He adjusted his collar, motioned for the curtains to part again, and stepped once more into the roar. The lights hit his face like sunrise. For a second, he looked 20 years younger. Lisa Marie peeked from the wings, frozen between pride and worry. Her father raised a hand toward her, subtle, like a secret gesture from across a dream. Then, into the mic, he said softly, "Bring her out." The band stopped cold. You could hear the hush sweep across the Hilton showroom like wind through an empty church. Lisa hesitated, clutching her teddy bear. Her mother's voice in her head said, "Don't go on stage, baby." But Elvis nodded again, gentle and sure. And somehow that was enough. She walked out, small and brave, bathed in light. The crowd gasped, not from surprise, but awe. It was like watching love itself step into the spotlight. Elvis knelt, holding the mic to her height. "This one's for my little girl," he said, his voice cracking on the last word. The first notes of "Can't Help Falling in Love" began, slow and trembling. His hands shook as he sang, but when Lisa slipped her tiny fingers into his free hand, the tremor stopped. Every person in that room felt it, a silence too deep for words. The king of rock and roll and his daughter, sharing a moment too pure for fame. Midway through the song, his eyes glistened. He looked down at her, whispering something between verses. Lisa blinked, confused, and nodded. No one in the audience could hear what he said, but her expression changed, joy melting into something else, a knowing sadness, like she understood more than a child ever should. When the final line came, "Some things are meant to be," he held it longer than ever before. The crowd erupted, standing as one. But as the applause thundered, Elvis stayed kneeling, still holding Lisa's hand. He leaned close again, and whatever he whispered next made her eyes fill with tears. From the front rows, people thought she was overwhelmed. They didn't see the way her mouth trembled when she whispered back, "Promise." He nodded once. Then he stood, wiping his eyes with his scarf, smiling for the cameras like nothing had happened. The music faded. Lisa backed toward the curtains, teddy bear pressed tight to her chest. Behind her, the sound of the crowd grew distant, almost unreal. She didn't know it yet, but the promise he made under that spotlight would become the last truth she'd ever carry from him. And within months, that promise would be all she had left. The spotlight burned bright as the final chord hung in the air. The band's instruments hummed with leftover vibration. Elvis lowered the mic slowly, as if it weighed 100 pounds. The crowd exploded, cheers, screams, tears. Some fans shouted, "We love you," while others just cried into their scarves. But none of that noise reached him. For a few seconds, Elvis Presley didn't hear the crowd at all. He was looking at Lisa Marie, small, trembling, trying her best to smile. He stepped forward and scooped her up into his arms. The ovation only grew louder, flashbulbs painting them in white bursts of light. She hid her face in his shoulder. Then, beneath the chaos, he leaned close to her ear. His lips moved, quiet, deliberate. Only Lisa heard the words. And when she did, her tiny hands gripped the back of his collar like she never wanted to let go. He whispered again, even softer this time. She shook her head, whispering back, "No," but the crowd's roar drowned her voice. To them, it looked like a tender father-daughter moment. To Lisa, it felt like the world slowing down. He kissed the top of her head and whispered the final line, words that would live in her memory long after the music ended. "When the lights go out, don't cry for me. Sing for me." She froze. The crowd screamed louder. He smiled through it, that same golden smile that hid every pain. Then he set her down gently, patting her cheek. "Go on, honey," he said, barely audible over the music swelling again. She nodded, blinking fast, her eyes glistening under the lights. Then she ran toward the side curtains. Backstage, the noise was deafening. The floor trembled with stomps and chants. "Elvis! Elvis!" Lisa leaned against the wall, heart pounding. She could still hear his voice echoing in her ear, those impossible words looping like a melody she couldn't stop. From the curtain gap, she watched him bow. He held the mic with both hands, head lowered, eyes closed for a long moment. When he finally looked up, his gaze found her again. One last nod, one last wink, and then, that smile. The same smile fans around the world would remember forever. Bright, unbroken, and peaceful. But for Lisa, it didn't look peaceful. It looked like goodbye. The crowd's cheers turned into a tidal wave. Elvis lifted his arms one last time. The band hit the final note. Cameras flashed, confetti rained. But right then, she noticed something the audience didn't. A flicker, a faint stumble. a hand clutching the edge of the piano for balance. He steadied himself, still smiling, still waving. And no one saw the exhaustion in his eyes except her. Security swarmed as he disappeared into the wings, the crowd chanting his name like a prayer. Lisa stayed behind the curtain, whispering to the empty stage, "I'll sing for you, Daddy. I promise." For years, she'd try to forget what he told her, but his whisper would follow her everywhere. In her dreams, in her songs, in every quiet room after the applause. Because that night, the king didn't just end a show. He handed her the weight of his legacy, in a single whisper only she could hear. After that night, the Las Vegas Hilton show was called historic. Newspapers wrote that Elvis Presley had found peace again. But behind the headlines, those who worked closest to him said the opposite. He was quiet, too quiet. Charlie Hodge would later tell a journalist. He'd come off stage smiling, but his eyes, they were already somewhere else. 8 months later, on August 16, 1977, the world woke to the sound of radio's interrupting morning music with a single sentence that froze time. Elvis Presley has died at his home in Graceland. In Los Angeles, Lisa Marie was just waking up when her mother entered the room. No words, just tears. The little teddy bear, the same one from that night, sat on her dresser, still wearing its red ribbon. She clutched it, waiting for someone to say it was a mistake. But the phones kept ringing. The television anchors kept repeating it. Crowds began gathering outside Graceland before noon. By sunset, there were more than 60,000 people pressed against the gates, singing softly through their grief. Lisa and her mother flew to Memphis under a veil of silence. She looked out the plane window the entire flight, whispering the line her father had told her. "When the lights go out, don't cry for me. Sing for me." At 4 p.m., they arrived at Graceland. The air was thick, heavy with heat and sorrow. Security guards tried to clear a path, but fans reached out, begging just to touch her hand. She didn't cry, not once. Inside, the house was dim. His white jumpsuit from that final Vegas show still hung in the closet. And on the nightstand, a photo of the two of them, her tiny hands around his neck. Beside it lay the teddy bear. The ribbon smelled faintly of stage cologne and dust. Lisa sat on the edge of the bed, the same place he had sat every night before shows, saying his quiet prayer, "Lord, let me give them my best." Now the room gave nothing back, just silence. She whispered, "You said not to cry, Daddy, but I don't know how not to." That night, as thousands lit candles outside, Lisa opened the window. She could hear the crowd singing "Love Me Tender." Their voices wove through the summer air like a lullaby. For the first time, she understood what he meant. The music didn't belong to him anymore. It belonged to them, to her. A soft breeze lifted the curtain. For a heartbeat, she swore she felt a hand on her shoulder. Light, familiar, comforting. She didn't turn. She just whispered, "I'll sing for you." Outside, a fan's radio caught the echo of a live recording from that last Vegas concert. Elvis's voice filled the night, warm and cracked but pure. "Take my hand. Take my whole life too." And somewhere between the wind and the static, it almost sounded like he was answering her. That was the night Lisa Marie Presley stopped being the little girl who stood in the wings, and started becoming the woman who would keep the promise. Because the night the music stopped for the world, it began again for her. For years after her father's death, Lisa Marie stayed silent. She never spoke about that final night. Not to friends, not to reporters, not even in interviews that begged for something personal. The world wanted stories. She carried silence. But grief has a sound all its own. You could hear it in her voice whenever she sang, soft, trembling, almost like she was talking to someone only she could hear. In 1988, during her first small recording session in Los Angeles, a sound engineer named Mark Finley noticed it. After one take, he turned to her through the glass and said, "That last line, it sounded like you were praying." Lisa smiled faintly. "I was." That same night, long after everyone left the studio, she pulled a worn piece of paper from her guitar case. It was the set list from her father's final show, folded and yellowing. In one corner, Written in his unmistakable scrawl were 3 words, "Sing for me." She ran her thumb across the ink, whispering, "I'm trying." That became her secret, the promise she'd never told anyone about. Every song she wrote carried it. Hidden in her lyrics were lines no one else understood. In Lights Out, she sang, "The rooms are dark, but I still hear you breathing." Fans thought it was about love. It wasn't. It was about Graceland. About that room, that night, that whisper she still heard in dreams. She once told a friend, "He's in every melody. I can't write without him." Even decades later, in interviews, when people asked, "What was your father's last performance like?" she'd smile and change the subject. But sometimes, for just a second, her eyes would drift away, as if replaying a moment only she could see. In 2002, a journalist pressed harder. They were sitting under studio lights, cameras rolling. Lisa hesitated, then said quietly, "He told me, when the lights go out, don't cry for me. Sing for me." The room fell silent. Even the crew stopped moving. She added, "I didn't understand it then. I do now." The interview aired once, and fans around the world felt something shift. It wasn't just about loss anymore. It was about a legacy whispered from father to daughter, passed like a secret chord no one else could play. That night, letters flooded her studio. A fan from Tokyo wrote, "When I sing, I feel him too." Another from Memphis sent a scarf from a 1976 concert, saying, "He still shines through you." Lisa kept them all in a box marked August. Inside, next to the letters, was the teddy bear. Ribbon faded, seams worn. Every August 16th, she'd take it out, place it by her window, and hum, "Love Me Tender." No audience, no lights, just her and the promise. And somewhere in that quiet, she always felt it again. That gentle warmth on her shoulder, the same one she'd felt at Graceland. As if the whisper had never really ended. It took Lisa Marie years to find the courage to stand under stage lights again. When she finally did, it wasn't Vegas or New York or London. It was Memphis, home. The date was August 16th, 2002, 25 years to the day since her father's passing. Graceland's front lawn was glowing with candles. Nearly 30,000 fans had gathered for the vigil. A soft wind carried the smell of wax and flowers. Lisa stood on a small stage set near the gates, a single mic in front of her. She could barely see through the tears and flashlights. A friend leaned over and whispered, "You don't have to do this." She smiled faintly. "Yes, I do." The crowd went quiet. For the first time in her life, she wasn't there as Elvis's daughter. She was there as the voice that had once promised him she would sing. She lifted the mic. "Thank you for keeping him alive," she said softly. "This one's for my dad." The first notes of "Don't Cry Daddy" began. Halfway through the first verse, her voice cracked. She paused, pressing her palm against the mic stand. The crowd didn't move. No one made a sound. Even the cicadas seemed to hush. Then, she took a breath and started again. Stronger. Truer. As she sang, the house lights flickered. A brief, strange pulse that made the candles glow brighter. Some said it was a power surge. Others said something else. Lisa didn't stop singing. Tears streamed down her face, but her voice stayed steady, echoing through the Memphis night. When she reached the chorus, the crowd joined in. Thousands of voices, one sound. She looked up toward Graceland's darkened windows and whispered under her breath, "I'm singing for you now." After the song, she stepped back, trembling. The crowd exploded in applause. Some shouted her name. Others cried openly. She looked at the sky, and for a moment, she could almost see it. That same spotlight glow, the faint shape of her father standing in it, smiling. When the applause died down, she left the stage quietly, clutching the teddy bear in one hand. Behind the crowd, a fan placed a handmade sign on the gate that read, "The lights never went out, Elvis." She turned them back on. That photo made national news the next morning. Every paper printed it beside Lisa's quote. "He told me not to cry when the lights went out. I didn't." E-song. From that day on, her shows always ended the same way. A single empty mic stood beside her. A spotlight shone on nothing and everything. She called it her promised light. And every August since, when Graceland's candles flicker and fans gather to sing, people say they can still feel that same warmth in the air, like a whisper in the wind, answering her back. Because sometimes, a promise doesn't fade with time. Sometimes, it becomes the light that never goes out. Decades later, people still talk about that night in Las Vegas. The encore, the hug, and the whisper that broke a little girl's heart. But Lisa Marie once said, "It didn't break me, it built me," because what her father gave her that night wasn't sorrow. It was purpose. The world remembers Elvis Presley as the king, but Lisa remembered him as something far simpler. A father who, in his final moment on stage, chose love over legacy. That whisper, "Don't cry for me, sing for me," became her compass, through heartbreak, through loss, through the years where her own voice trembled under the shadow of his. Every time the lights dimmed and the music began, she felt him there. Not as a ghost, but as guidance. When asked once if she ever stopped missing him, she smiled sadly and said, "You don't stop missing someone like that. You just start carrying them in your song." It's easy to think legends fade when the music ends. But some notes never die, they just change hands. And that's what Lisa learned. That love doesn't vanish when the lights go out. It lingers in every melody, every photograph, every crowd that still sings "Love Me Tender" with tears in their eyes. At Graceland today, that same teddy bear rests in a glass case beside her photo. Ribbon faded, seams soft with age. Below it, a small plaque reads, "For Daddy." The lights never went out. Visitors still stop to stare. Some smile, some cry, and some whisper quietly, as if answering a call only their hearts can hear. Because the truth behind that whisper, the one the world waited decades to know, wasn't about death. It was about continuity. The music didn't end in 1977. It simply passed to another voice. And through that voice, Elvis Presley kept his final promise. If this story touched you, share it with someone who still hums his songs, or someone who never got to hear him live. Because love like this doesn't fade. It echoes. So next time you hear "Can't Help Falling in Love," close your eyes and listen for the whisper that never stopped singing.